live stream from my home studio. And thank you, the two of you who liked my previous video. Much appreciated. Today I'm going to only talk about myself. That is my fantasy world. So I'm going to go you through the world map that I showed you last time, just a glimpse of, and try to explain the different cultures and the different landscape that defines the great big southern continent, as it is called in my fantasy world. So my fantasy world is 10 times bigger than our planet Earth. So physics don't really apply here. So there might be some kind of explanation in terms of gravity and rules which actually should apply to having a planet that massive as this planet. But it's a fantasy world, and I made this world maybe 20 years ago, and at that time I didn't really take into consideration the actual physics involved with making a planet this big. So today I'm going to try to give an overview of the different countries, cultures, and interesting geographical features. So this will be another incoherent, unstructured, live walkthrough in a way. So you have to excuse me if it's a bit chaotic at times. Also, I think my neighbor upstairs is having a party, so you might hear some screams. But that's not from my dungeon. I told them to be quiet tonight, so I gave them some sleeping medication. So there should be no noise coming from the dungeon, but there might be some noise coming up from the neighbor upstairs. So what you see in the upper part of the screen is a view from the map making program that I use, which is called Wonderdraft. So let me start by going into the map and zooming in on to the Empire of Nippon, which is roughly based on Japan in the 15th century. I have excluded some of the racism, some of the negative connotations that I feel it's not really proper to sort of role play exactly as things were. So I take sort of the bits that I like and make my own version of the Tokugawa period Japan. And this also is setting which I have been playing as a DM for, I don't know, maybe 3 decades, a long time. But it has been many years between each time I picked up the campaign. So until a couple of years ago, it was maybe 20 years since I last played in my campaign. The name of the empire is called Nippon. It's really I'm trying to find another name of the empire, because Nippon means Japan, so it's really not that fantasy. So if maybe someone who is watching this in the future might come with a suggestion, and I will seriously consider it to rename the entire empire. So you have an outstanding opportunity. You can rename an entire empire if you find a cool name. So, and also the names is from when I just started. So that time we didn't have access to all the resources you have today on internet. So maps was a very good source of names. Today you have wonderful sites as fantasy name generators. and they generate genuinely new names based on the language you choose or the cultural settings you choose, and it generates new names which are don't exist, or at least not so common. So in terms of my empire here, it's so it's like I have some names, but it's not really the culture is not completely copied from Japan. It's more like the feeling of it, Japan in the 15th century. Because what's important is to have samurai, to have ninjas, and to have onis, that is demons, and all other aspects of the Japanese culture, which is super interesting. When I did my initial research, I actually spent some time at the university library and read through Oxford's history of Japan, and tried to especially try to capture the sort of the flavor of the culture. Of course, it's impossible to do that in a fantasy game as this, but I picked some aspects of it which I thought was interesting, especially the caste system. I'm an anthropologist by education, and in my but my master's degree, I wrote about data hackers, computer hackers, so that's completely irrelevant to what I'm talking about. But the point is, I picked, especially focused on I picked out the caste system and tried to understand it, because the caste system is a system where some people are worth more than others based on your blood or your inheritance or your biological relationships. So if you're born into a low caste, you're born. You can't get out. You're stuck there. So to me, it was I had it back in my mind. I wanted to create for the players this feeling of injustice, even though they were in a culture that was cool and had ninjas and samurai. I had in the back of my mind to take some negative aspects and try to, because it's interesting to juxtapose between our current humanistic way of looking at humans. By that I mean we tend to emphasize human rights, equality between sexes, and different sexual I don't know the Norwegian name the English name for it, but to be yourself without facing any kind of repercussions from the society. And so I try to make this juxtaposition so the players are aware of I'm not trying to punch them in the face with injustice, but making them aware of it in a way and make it interesting in terms of role-playing. Because I think most players want to play a good character, a character that is someone who cares about others and want to help people who are less fortunate than the adventurers that the players play. So so I try to make the culture sort of focus on things that might really not be covered in other source books about Japanese culture in fantasy settings, So I try to bring that in. Also, I replaced it, and I might be getting some angry comment on this, but for instance, the Japanese racism towards Koreans. I try to replicate that in terms of another culture across the sea, and also towards elves, actually. So in my empire, the elves are you don't see them because they have been cast out of the empire a long time ago, and it's a very strong adverse feelings, negative feelings towards the elves without reason, So that's classical racism, if you like. But I don't try to punch the players in the face and look at this. This is, but to make them sort of aware of it itself. But the main point of my campaign is, of course, to have fun. But I think sometimes it's fun to throw things to the players, and also to play with their expectations, especially in the fantasy settings, because in the fantasy settings you have the women have chainmail bikinis, and the men have only loincloth and very muscular, and the women are large bosoms and etc. So of course it's like that also in my world, but I will tell you about another culture in my campaign world, which I think is quite fun to roleplay because of these expectations that you might have, and try to turn them on their head in a way. I can start by talking about Danora. Danora is, if I can give you some context on the map, you see here, for those of you who was not here last time, this is roughly the size of Japan today, the Empire of Nippon. So if you go across the harbor, or across the sea, you have a sea called the Hamada Sea, which is here. And you have a country or empire called Pusan. This is roughly based on China. And then you have Danora, which is sort of a desert, and not desert, but steppe landscape, or a taiga, like almost no forests, only flat countrysides of landscape. Typical Mongolian deserts or plains, and there I put horse people, but there are let me see, I found the name of it because I had to Google the name of the opposite of misogyny, which is misandry. So this is a country which looks at, which sort of it's a matriarchal society, which means that only the women can hold positions of power, and only the women can make decisions, and only the women can take care of money, because in the culture of Danora, men are looked upon as too emotional to be able to hold any office or be head of the family. So the Danora people is like a horse people. They worship a horse god and have this whole pantheon of gods. But since there are people who travel by horse, they have some similarity with the Mongolian tribes, Genghis Khan, but it's like only women who are who run the business. So men are, of course, strong and can fight, but they are not sort of suppressed. They are not given an opportunity to rise and shine. So, of course, when my players meet characters from Danora, it's kind of confusing, and I think it's very funny to run encounters and sort of turn it on its head, the expectation of a situation. For instance, my players came to a small village, which was was a Danora village, and they saw the men of Danora was carrying around beer and serving and standing guard, but it was the women who was in charge, and the women who was pinching the men on the buttocks and being sort of Me Too moments in a way, being very sort of aggressive in a way in their way of speaking and their sexuality. So it was quite fun to make those situations appear sometimes, and see how the players react to that. So that's Danora. That's a horse people, if you like. And then you have Ukkurush, which is an ancient desert empire who 1,000 years ago suffered a terrible curse which killed every inhabitant in the country, and also made it so that anyone who traveled within the borders of the empire died within a day of a mysterious illness. And the reason for this curse was that in the capital of Fas Muxras, which is was a massive city with 1.5 million people, and they had big pyramids, and they became so powerful that they wanted to take the power from the gods and make the power their own. So they tried to make a mysterious ritual, but it failed, the ritual or the spell, and as a revenge, the goddess came down and killed everyone in the country and put a curse on the country, which made it inhabitable for like 1,000 years. And it was cursed until just a few sessions ago, when my players managed to fight this this god with the help of another god, which is a story I can tell maybe some other time. So what happens now is that you have this massive desert empire, sort of similar to what you can... the culture of Ukurush is a little bit Assyrian, a little bit of Conan, and a mix mash of other things. So the point is, anyway, that you have a country which had a lot of people living there who suddenly died, and you have a lot of treasure, you have a lot of locations, you have a lot of adventures that could happen when and if the players choose to travel here. You have like ancient libraries, which are supposed to hold great secrets, and you have of course, a lot of mines. There was a population of desert dwarfs who lived here, and they also died. So everything they dug out from the mines is still in the mines. So it's a question of who gets there first to claim the mine. So at the moment, when we're about to start next time, it will be a sort of a gold rush of a lot of people coming into the empire to try to capture and get what their hands on the treasure that is existing. So that's a big desert empire. And then you have the Svanendal Empire, which is based on the Dutch in the 17th century. And they are merchants. They are not interested in having soldiers, or instead they pay a lot of money to have mercenaries. So they have trade routes all over this big, great southern continent, and they live and they are super rich. Sort of the city-states in Italy, in the Mediterranean. In Italy in the 12th, 13th century. And sort of they are combined in this trade empire. And they all have big noses and big mustaches and speak strange language. But they are tolerated within the empire because they bring wealth into the empire of Nippon. And then you have the bad guys, which is the Cadulians, and they are a sort of I try to describe them as they are quite evolved, maybe like France in the 16th century. So you can imagine the French, but with human sacrifices instead. And they worship a god who and this pantheon, or this religion is sort of a bureaucratic hell. So the Cadulians are very eager to make good deeds according to their gods, so they can sort of have a good bureaucratic office when they go into the afterlife. Because they have this idea of the afterlife being a huge bureaucracy, and the culture of the Cadulian Empire is one of you can make parallels to East Germany, where people were sort of telling on each other. So this sort of fear of the neighbor maybe telling the authorities that you are not worshipping enough make people worship more. So it's a sort of I'm trying to find a name. It's a clever name. Panopticon. Foucault, a French philosopher, who in the 19th century, 20th century, he wrote a book about the Pantheon. And the Pantheon, I don't remember at the moment who came up with the idea, but the Pantheon was a British philosopher. Was it Hume? I don't remember. But he had this idea of making a prison in a way that the prison was like a circle. All the cells were located along a circle. And in the middle, you had a tall structure. And this was the watchtower where the guard was sitting. But all the cells were open towards the watchtower. So they knew that the guy in the watchtower, the prisoners, knew that the guy in the watchtower, he was watching them, but they didn't know when because they couldn't see the guard. So the point of having such a panopticon prison is that everybody behaves because they are afraid. They don't know if they're being observed or not. So that's a sort of the Cadulean Empire in a nutshell, in a way. It's a panopticon where people are afraid to, because if they believe that maybe someone is watching, and they use magic to conduct surveillance on their populations. They have, for instance, in some homes they have you must have a sort of a mask, and this mask can be listening to them, and this mask is supposed to be a symbol of their religion. And every household in Cadulia must have this, and this mask is rumored to have the possibility to listen in and to tell the Burgermeister or the authorities that, okay, this family is not following protocol. So it's a dictatorship in a medieval setting, using magic as a way to suppress the population. So anyway, so this is sort of the bad guys, because they have been expansionists. This empire has been trying to invade and take over the entire continent, including Nippon. So a year ago, we had the players throwing the Cadulians out of Nippon, because the Cadulians had invaded Nagasaki and had taken a part of the empire. So the players threw them out through a battle and fought some higher level NPCs from Cadulian Empire. So that's the Cadulians. So they are sort of hang on. The antagonist of this particular campaign part, or they are not an antagonist of the incomplete. They are sort of the bad guys, yes, but they have fulfilled their role as a way to introduce the players to see more of the world. So they are, of course, their enemy in the future also, but there are more people hiding out there who want to who want to do some bad things with Nippon, the place where my players come from. And let me see how we can get focus. Yes, there we go. So here we have Hildesheimer, which is a setting very much based on Norse Vikings, especially based on the Vikings series on HBO. this is not so much as Norwegian, Norse as it was in my country like 1,000 years ago. It's not like Vikings. It's like in my city 1,000 years ago. This is more like a cinematic Hollywood version of them. And then you have, so this is yeah, I wanted also to mention that. So you have the Hildesheimer, which is sort of the Norse, with tattoos and braided hair, both men and women, and the women are strong, and so are the men, and they're equal, etc. And they have long ships, and they do a lot of piracy, but also do a lot of trade, as the original Vikings did. A lot of fjords. It took a lot of time to make these fjords in Wonderdraft, so fjords are hard. And above, I have not the map here, but above Hildesheimer, I have made room for the Sami, a Sami-inspired culture, because the Sami is a ethnic group located here in Norway, and it's a really interesting culture. So I have also a spot for them here. So I want to expand on that by using characters who have their culture sort of. They are shamanic. They have shamans and a naturalistic religion. So they are somewhere, and I'm pointing at the screen. So they are somewhere up here in the map. So I have not yet put them in here with their proper Sami names. A bit inspired by, might I add. And then you have, across the continent, you have a place called Osmakal, which is, you have really bad orcs living there. And they come quite often down into Hildesheimer to do war and to pillage. So it's a constant struggle between this Osmakal and Hildesheimer people. And then you have, I have to just, I maybe talked too much already, but this is Drakan, and Drakan is desert and scantily clad women in chainmail bikinis. And I have some keywords written down here: steel and blood, and demons and red dragons, and really obscure primal gods. So this is sort of here you can live out all your fantasies about a desert fantasy world. So, and this is a large place. This is, I think you can, yeah, this is like half the Mediterranean Sea, actually. So it's a big place. And then you have like geographical places, that the plain of Succubu. It's like all the sailors, they don't want to go ashore, because they know that this place is haunted by demons. And you have, let me see here. So this entire coastline is mostly desert, actually. So, and it's mostly inhabited because there's a lot of evil energy permeating from the ground from ancient times. Because if you look at the map, you will notice that it's something up here, which is a circular geographical feature. So maybe that's a sign of something that happens a long, long time ago. And then you have Carocas, which is sort of based on some aspects of Balkan culture, especially Serbian and Montenegrin culture. So they are into deep forests, angry women, and bitter men, strong patriarchy. So that's opposite of the Nora society. In this society, the women are the men are in charge. Black eyeshadow, and lots of dukes and noble families who struggle to be the one who rules Carocas. it's fun place to have as a potential for a future adventure sessions. Let me see here. Yeah, I can tell you about Tao Fa, which is an elvish realm. Many centuries ago, most of the elves were driven out of the different countries which they resided in, due to a rumor or a story that they were making the life of the humans miserable, and they were driven out, exodus, from their countries where they lived, and they all moved far north on the continent, and now bitter and secluded, and really angry at the humans. Their realm is far in the north, in a deep forest, who is covered by snow most of the time. So, and they really resent the humans, they who live here. Of course, you have a few elves who travel and live among the humans. The more societies to sort of grant them the ability, or grant them citizenship. But you shouldn't really travel up here if you are a human and sort of drop in there, because they don't like humans anymore. Yeah, and I have also some places here. Realm of the Ice Queen. This is a place where there is an Ice Queen living there, and she's the undisputed ruler, and she has a whole legion of ice giants and orcs who are her army, and she's really old. Some people say she's almost 8,000 years old, so she's not a human. So she could be either a magical being, or she's being an undead creature who have managed to stay at the top of the power in this part of the world. The Paradise Coast is not a paradise, it's just firmly packed ice floating or sort of in the coast all the way up to the Arctic area, which is complete. This is covered in ice, so this is you can't really travel further than to the Paradise Coast, because north of the Paradise Coast is just pack ice. So you have to take out your skis and ski north if you want to continue. And nobody knows what's up here. They only have sort of names of the different regions. And you also have a place called Realm of the Ghosts. My salad is maybe not so unique, but Realm of the Ghosts is a place where undeads wander. Some say that it's the people who have been lost at sea, or there is some sort of magical power who permeates a certain place within this realm, which drags or summons the undead to this location. Because there has been stories about travelers who have come across undead who just was walking in the direction of this place. So there is a sort of, especially in the neighboring countries, it's a belief that when you die, and if you're not buried properly, your body will rise, and you will walk north towards the realm of the ghosts. No people lives there, only the dead, and nobody knows if there is someone who is ruling them. Yeah. And the Endless Forest, this is like Finland times 1 million. This is like hyper Finland, or super Finland. Finland, as some of you might know, is a country made out of, bear with me, mostly large, deep forest and lots of lakes. So this area is, this entire area, this is like Europe, continental Europe. So it's like Maxi Finland. People live there, and there's a certain race of humanoids who also lives deep within the forest, who calls themselves the Valihari. But if you're a lumberjack, you're gonna love the endless forest, because there's so many trees there. Yeah. And then you have a huge mountain range called the Masaran mountain range, which is the tallest mountains are like 20,000 kilometers high, so it's 2 times the size of Mount Everest, which creates some sort of interesting weather patterns in this particular area of the world. And then you have another place with a lot of trees, the Aledari Deep Forest, which is it's a large river who traverses down into, or from and deep within the continent out to the sea. This is a very place where you can sort of build farms and live happily on your own, because there's so much food to gather from the nature, and the weather is not too bad either. Currently, nobody has claimed any governorship of this place, so it could be you. Yeah. So let me see. Have I forgotten something? Probably. Yeah. Yeah, I can take one more and then I can quit. You probably are asleep by now, but I wanted to talk about the Kirket Strait. Where is it? The Kirket Strait. Our pirates. Let me see. The Great Western Gate is. You have the Great Western Gate, and then you have in the Great Southern Gate. These are like Cape the Good Hope. It's like a place where if you have traveled by ship, you have to pass it, and it's very dangerous, especially during the winter period. Let me see. So that's it's also the place of a famous lighthouse out there somewhere. I can't seem to find the pirate place, but there are pirates also somewhere here. So this was a quick look at. I can maybe do one thing if I can get it to work. So this was a live tour of my campaign world. So the final thing I wanted to show, just for fun, is let me see if I can get it up here. Add source. Window. I think that's one. Yeah. So this is, if you're a player, you might recognize this. But this is an underground map. It's difficult to see here, but I can try to explain. So my players, they're old characters. They were doing a series of adventures in the underworld. And as you saw on the previous map of Nippon is it's a island empire. So when they found out that they could access the underworld through a volcano, they traversed down into the cave system and traveled way down into and under. And also, and after many days, they sort of, we must be above us must be the big sea, and that's true because I mapped out the entire system. So if I zoom into here, and if you're a player, you haven't seen this before. So the players start in Nagasaki. It's sorry about the name, but it has stuck, so I can't change it now. So the name Nagasaki is the city is where my players, it's their home city, and it's a coastal city. So my players, they found out that if they went to this volcano, which you maybe see here, Yamabubu, and they could travel along this white line here, this is the underground passage. And if I zoom in here, you see this blue hexagon map sort of above the map of the underground, and each blue hexagon is 1 day travel. So yeah, so and the coastline of Nagasaki or the empire goes roughly diagonal across this map. So I mapped out everything. So they only have seen maybe 10% of the map. So I know I can't show anymore. Okay, I hope you found this somewhat interesting. It's always fun to talk about your own things, but sometimes it can be very boring for the people who are listening. So yeah. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope to make another one not so long, not so far from now. So have